And now, it's BoomerLife, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is BoomerLife on CIL 650.
Well, hello and welcome to Boomer Life here on CIL 650. As you perhaps have gathered from that musical interlude, we're going to talk a lot about money on the program today. Specifically, we're going to talk about debt and debt problems, and most importantly, solutions to debt problems. The discussion we're about to have should give you every reason to believe there is hope and that there is freedom after debt. It's a real pleasure to welcome back to the program George Abakhan, the president of Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy. George, how are you?
I'm well, thank you very much, Stu.
It's good to see you again. We've had some delegations from the firm over the past few weeks. It's nice to have you back in the studio. Tell us, just right off the top, George, what exactly is a trustee in bankruptcy? What do you do for a living?
Well, what we do for a living, what I do for a living, is make settlements with people's debts and try to avoid bankruptcy where I can. On the other hand, we can do, I try to liken myself not as a funeral director, but as a doctor trying to, of restructuring your debt, settling your debt so that you can move forward with a clear conscience and no stress.
Okay, and so a trustee is a federally licensed individual. There are quite a limited number of you right across Canada. You're rather a select group, aren't you?
Well, we are in some respects, but on the other hand, we've all had to be trained. We have experience. We have exams we have to take. We have oral boards that we have to sit before. If you don't pass the written, you don't get to go before the oral board. The oral board consists of experienced people like lawyers and trustees, and also members of the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, and they sit right across the country and examine people who wish to be a trustee. And also, all our funds are in trust. They're examined by the members of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, and all the type of stuff that we do, bankruptcies and or proposals or settlements, are examined and standardized by the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy.
Is there such a thing as a Bankruptcy Act? Is that the legislation that governs the way you do your job?
Absolutely. That's called the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. And that governs the type of what we have to do. Then on top of that, you have the superintendent's directives. That's the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. And where the Bankruptcy Act may not be particularly clear on a particular set of circumstances or criteria, then the superintendent's directives form the basis of what we do.
All right. Tell us a little bit about Abakhan and Associates. Here at the end of 2014, you have 5 offices around British Columbia, in Victoria, in Surrey, in Vancouver, of course, and upcountry in Vernon and Prince George. You're also a very mobile group, you and your colleagues. You travel the province extensively, but take us back to that first office. When was that, George?
Oh, the first office, I guess, was Vancouver, and that started out as a result of me retiring from Deloitte's, and I started getting phone calls, and I didn't have a non-compete clause with Deloitte's. People wanted me to help them, which is basically what I do, so I set up, first I had 1 person, then 2 or 3 persons, suddenly it's 5 or 6, and then we started getting calls from Victoria, and we ended up setting first an executive office, then we ended up with a branch, and anyway, that's how it evolved.
Right.
And Prince George was next, and then there was Vernon that came on in 2009, and now we have Surrey. It's been operating now for a couple of years, and we're looking at another area in the province which I can't divulge, but
Okay. Suffice it to say, though, that, in terms of observing the growth of Abakhan and Associates, it's a favorable story from the point of view of an evolving business model. But, George, the rescue work that you do with indebted people would suggest that in the time that your company has been growing, it has been because a lot of British Columbians have been getting themselves into more than a little bit of financial pickle.
Yes, but also I'd like to think that it's because of our own activities that we've become known as debt restructuring. I'd say experts, but certainly people that would prefer to do debt restructuring than bankruptcies.
Okay.
And as such, we get a lot of referrals from people from what I would call satisfied customers. Satisfied debtors. They refer people that they know are in trouble to us, and probably 20 to 30% of our business comes that way.
Interesting stuff. Now, we'll talk about the various avenues available to indebted individuals to sort themselves out and sort their lives out as we progress. But I wanted to come back to just the whole matter of being a trustee in bankruptcy. What is the difference, George, between you, a trustee in bankruptcy, and a credit counselor? What would the essential difference between the two of you be?
I think the essential difference is that we operate under a federal law.
Okay.
We're appointed under federal law, and we are actually federal officers, and we can actually force, or not force, but push settlements whereby credit counselors don't have that power, don't have that authority. They have the authority from whoever they represent as creditors. They generally represent banks, from what I can gather, and other people that they have relationships with. But in our case, all creditors have to be dealt with, and by and large, on the smaller type of proposals, etc., we need 45 days and 50% of the creditors. If the 50% of the creditors agree, then they're locked in. And that means that Revenue Canada can be locked in. Any other creditor that disputes it, for instance, let's say we have a proposal or a debt settlement restructuring at 25 cents on the dollar, and some creditor, some credit card company wants 35 cents. Well, if the other creditors all agree at, or 50% of them agree at 25 cents, that's what the deal is.
Okay. Now, are credit counselors capable of producing the same sorts of arrangements, or is this the domain exclusively of the trustee?
I believe it to be the exclusive domain of ourselves.
Right.
I think credit counselors can get individual creditors to agree at less than 100%. I think they can get interest for forgiveness or reductions of interest.
Right.
But they can't get across the board cancellation of debt at the levels that we can.
Okay. Well, it's important to understand because there's a lot of information out there that those of us on the receiving end are still trying to sort it out, and some of the jargon, some of the terminology can be a little confusing. So, talk to us a little bit, if you would, George, please, about those avenues of recourse. Oh, but first of all, in the matter of counseling. In the course of discharging your responsibilities and duties as a trustee, one of those is providing counseling, financial counseling, to your clients, isn't it?
Exactly. Part of the process is that a debtor, a person that actually does a debt restructuring, and or if he goes bankrupt, or he or she goes bankrupt, they have to undertake counseling.
That's part of the package?
And that's part of the package.
Okay.
It's part of our fee. And our fee, as I say, is not paid up front. It's paid during the course of the proposal as the payments are made. And there are 2 counseling sessions that take place, one generally about 2 months into the bankruptcy and or proposal or the debt settlement, and one around 8 months. And we supply the credit counselor. And what that involves is sitting with the credit counselor, and understanding debt and how to handle debt on an ongoing basis. And but as I say, it's part of the fee, and it's also mandatory.
Right. Now let's talk about the options available to someone who is, shall we say, sinking rapidly in debt. The nose is barely above water. Circumstances have been turned rather bleak, and the phone calls are happening, the letters. Life isn't much fun anymore, and you've really hit the sort of the end of your tether. And I'm sure you talk to people like this literally every day you go to work. Ultimately, in the case of a lot of us, and most of us don't know as much as we pretend to when it comes to financial matters. And so when you get into this sort of dire strait, the automatic reaction, I think, for many of us, George, would be, well, it looks like I have no recourse here. I guess I just got to throw in my hands and go bankrupt. And that isn't necessarily the case in fact, in the majority of cases, is it?
Absolutely. 70% of our filings per month average 65 to 70% are proposals or are debt restructurings. And you're absolutely right. People will come to me and they say, I got to go bankrupt.
Right.
I got debt from my business that failed, or I've got too many credit cards or whatever. And I say, well, there are options. I mean, I ask simple questions like, what's your take-home pay? And if I try to settle your debt at say 20 cents on the dollar or 25 cents on the dollar, and bring down your payments to $250, can you afford that, do you think? And when they say yes, I say, well, then there's a potential that you could follow a debt restructuring process that we offer here, also under the Bankruptcy Act.
Are people surprised when you say, well, look, you may not have to go to that extreme that you've already resigned yourself to?
Oh yes, absolutely. It happens all the time. They have no awareness of the debt restructuring process,
which we know as a consumer proposal, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so what is a consumer proposal?
A consumer proposal is a settlement with the creditors, and they have to be all the creditors, excepting for secured creditors. Secured creditors are people with mortgages or a lien on the car, conditional sale contract, etc. But all other creditors have to be part of the process. Now, we do the paperwork, we submit a comparison as to what would be in bankruptcy, and a proposal has to be better than a bankruptcy. A debt restructuring has to be better than a bankruptcy. So if we work out something at, say, 25 cents, we offer it to all the creditors. The creditors invariably will look at it. They'll see what happens in bankruptcy because we give them the comparative, and they would probably agree. Now, there are cases where they may not agree. Sometimes Revenue Canada is involved because the guy hasn't submitted income tax returns for 10 years.
Right.
And that'll create a problem. But in most cases we can sort out, and as I say, the relief when they finally find out that they don't have to go bankrupt, they can make the payments. They can also prepay the payments as they go down the route of making the proposal or making the debt restructuring payments, and be out and reestablishing the credit a lot earlier.
Interesting stuff. And as you say, I'm sure in many instances the relief is not only visible, it's palpable. You watch a person transform right before your very eyes. Seriously? You mean I can do something else other than just go crashing into bankruptcy?
Well, I give them the option. I say, if you can afford to make the payment, I would recommend you do the proposal. And if things get better down the road, then you can prepay it. And you're out of it. You can reestablish your credit and also start again.
Well, we talked at the beginning of the program, friends, about solutions to debt problems, and the fact that our discussion hopefully will give you lots of reasons to believe there is hope with debt issues and resolving them, and that there's freedom after the resolution occurs. And here to guide us through the process is the president of Abakhan and Associates, George Abakhan. And Abakhan, by the way, you might want to check him out online while we take a quick break. Abakhan is spelled Abakhan, and it's Abakhan.com. And we're back with lots more on Boomer Life in just a couple of minutes.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIAL 650.